Hey, what's going on, everybody? If this is your first time tuning in to Tim's Tidbit, I'd like to say welcome. If it's not your first time tuning in, I still want to say welcome and give you a nice hearty, well, thank you for always pulling up the Tim's Tidbit. And you are now tuned in to Mama, I Want to Trade. Hey, hey. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Mama I Want to Trade, aka Tim's Tidbit, aka ICT Concepts Explained, whatever you want to call it. You are now tuned in to the second series, which is the price action series, where we go through price action and find a bullish and a bearish example of the different PD arrays. Speaking of the PD arrays, if you have not checked out the Lingo playlist, please go back and check the Lingo playlist out, because it's a prerequisite to understand the price action playlist. But just in case you did not, we will give a quick recap of what the PDA is before we go find the price action. Now, without further ado, let's go to the split screen and get into the next PD array, which is, drum roll please, the fair value gaps. The fair value gap is another imbalance. We've now seen two reference points, and now this is our second imbalance. Again, an imbalance is when something is left out in price. When price moves too far too fast in one direction or the other, it leaves an imbalance. And the fair value gap is another imbalance. Let's get into it for those who did not look at the Lingo playlist. Let's go back and see what a fair value gap is, will we? Or shall we, should I say? A fair value gap is caused by one-sided price distribution, meaning heavy distribution, heavy movement, just going too far too fast in one direction, and it creates a fair value gap. Let's look at the definition in the way Lil Timmy Rogers understands it. If you want to see the true definition in its full glory, please go check out ICT's videos on fair value gaps in his core content videos. His core content playlist. But this is the way Lil Timmy Rogers understands what ICT explains a fair value gap is. Let's read it together, shall we? A 3-candle pattern where candle 1 and candle 3 do not share price. That little space in there, that's the fair value gap. See, in this case, the low of candle 1, that's candle 1, and the high of candle 3, that's candle 3, they do not share price. And that space in between there is the fair value gap. Now, let's go see if we can try to find a bullish fair value gap, right? Fair value gaps are relatively easy to see most of the time for me. I still don't think it's the easiest. I think the swing highs and swing lows are the easiest to see. But the fair value gap and the liquidity void, they're right up there with easy to see, right? The breakers, the mitigation blocks, those are a little bit more difficult to see, in my opinion. Take a little bit more training of the eye. But the fair value gap in the liquidity voids, they're right up there with the swing highs and swing lows as far as easy to see. Now that I've wasted all that time talking, you should have had the opportunity to find plenty fair value gaps, right? But the one I'm looking for, the bullish fair value gap I'm looking for, is somewhere in this area. Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it? It's a bunch of them all over the screen, but the one I want you to find is somewhere in this area. Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it? Let's put the annotations on the screen and see if you were right. There you go. Right? Let's read it together. Because of heavy buy-side distribution at candle 2, right? This is candle 2 right here. The heavy buy-side distribution, it took off. In other words, it got the ping, it was gone, right? Because of the heavy buy-side distribution at candle 2, the high of candle 1, this is candle 1, and the low of candle 3, this is candle 3, do not share price, right? Do you see what I'm saying? The low of candle 3, the high of candle 1, that space in there, that's the fair value gap. Let's put it on the screen. Boop, right there. That's your bullish fair value gap, because we got heavy bullish activity, heavy buy side distribution in candle 2 thrusting it in one direction too far, too fast, pause, and it left a fair value gap because candle 1's high and candles 3's low do not share price. Let's go back once again in case I lost anyone. Clean screen, right? Here's one right over here, right? There's one there. There's one there. They're all over. There's a small one there, right? All of these bullish fair value gaps. There's one right over there. But the one we're focusing on here, there's one right there. The one we're focused on is right here, right? So we got candle 1, candle 2 with heavy, come on. Candle 2 with heavy buy side distribution. Then you got candle 3 that doesn't come back down and intersects with candle 1 in any kind of way. And because the low of candle 3 and the high of candle 1 don't overlap, that space in between those two candles is the fair value gap. That's the bullish fair value gap. Now, let's see if we can find a bearish. We got plenty on this screen too. There's a bearish fair value gap. There's a bearish fair value gap. Plenty of them. There's a bearish fair value gap. There's a bearish fair value gap. Plenty of them. But let's go to another example, right? Looking for the bearish fair value gap. And the one I'm looking for is over here in this area somewhere. Right over in this area right here. Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it? It's a million of them on the screen. But do you see the one over here? Let's put annotations on the screen. Boop. There you go. Let's read it together. Because of heavy sell side distribution at candle 2, right? This is candle 2. Heavy sell side distribution. See the size of the candle is heavy distribution. Big money is moving the charts when you see the candles this size like this moving, right? The low of candle 1, that's candle 1, the teeny one there, and the high of candle 3, this big one here, the high of candle 3, they do not share price. And since they don't share price, that leaves what? A bullish fair value gap. I mean, you're bearish. I'm sorry, fair value gap. The bearish fair value gap. Let's go back once again for anyone, just in case I may have lost somebody, right? You got candle 1. Candle 2 has heavy distribution, right, to the sell side. Then candle 3 does not come back up and overlap with candle 1's price. And since the high of candle 3 and the low of candle 1 don't touch, that space in between there, right there, is a fair value gap. Now, keep in mind what I have been saying about knowing when you're in a discount market or a premium market, because that's what's gonna, every gap is not gonna be a fair value gap, right? We're gonna get more to that in the strategy section, but you have to understand when you're in a premium market and a discount market, and pay attention to the heavy distribution from the algos to understand when it's going to be considered a fair value gap. We'll get more to that in the strategy section, but for now, just go back through, back test, and see if you can find as many bullish and bearish fair value gaps as you can. Hopefully, I did not confuse anyone. Feel free to play this back as many times as you need, or feel free to go to ICT's video on fair value gaps and get it in its full glory from the mentor himself. And again, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mama, I Want to Trade. Hey, hey. And I'll see you in the next one, man. Gone.